Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Welcome to Dev with Excel. All right, in this video, we are going to be concluding the exercise 2.11. So in the previous video, we created a db.json file and then we added this data into it. And then we started the server on port 3001 and then on the browser using this endpoint, we're able to render this data we have here on the browser, which is what we have here. All right, so in this particular video, like I said, we are going to be concluding it. That means we are going to be solving this next part of it. So here we are expected to modify the application such that the initial state of the data is fetched from the server using the axios library. Complete the fetching with an effect hook. So the main thing for this video is for this part of the exercise is we are expected to use the axios library, right, fetch fetch the data directly. All right, so let's see how that works. Going into the code implementation. So here, this is the setup we had for this exercise 2.11. I'm simply going to cd into this part if currently we are not in this part. So let's wait for this to come up. All right, so I'm simply going to cd into this part. And here, when we come to this part here, let's refresh and see. Okay, so here, running this endpoint on the browser does not return anything for us, right? Because the server is currently down. Now, when we come here to load the server, right, or to launch it, let's see what happens. Okay, so when we come back here to refresh this page, we are expected to have the data returned, right? So here the data is directly being called from the db.json. That's what is currently happening, right? But in this case now, I think we will need to run the data from or using the axios, right? Using the axios. So what we can do is this. We are going to close this terminal, yes, and then we need to install two libraries, right? We need to install axios and json server. So that those are what we actually have here. Using the npm, in my own case, we install the axios and also we install the json server as a dev dependency. All right, so what this means is for the dev dependency, it means that we are not going to be using the json server in production, right? So this server is only used for development purposes, and as such we are going to be installing it inside the dev dependency. That means that when in production, this server is not going to be in use, right? And after doing that, we can just put this in a script, right? Okay, so here is what is going to happen. I'm going to copy this and then heading over to the code implementation. Like I said, the first thing we need to do is we need to okay, why this is coming up, we need to install the axios and the json server. Already I have the both of them installed, so I don't think I might need to install them. If you want to install them, just do npm I axios, you click on enter. Then for the json server, you simply just use this npm install json server, you place it here and then you hit the enter key, right? So that installs both the json server and the axios for us. All right, so going to the package json, we are going to see that you should be having axios here and also you should be having json server here as a dev dependency. Right now, instead of us coming here to run npx json server dash dashboard, we simply be using npm run server, and that should work fine. And how can we do that? We need to add the JSON server as a script here. So coming to this part of the material, so there's a place it's implemented here. We could just simply use it. Okay, so going up. So here we could just copy this and add it to our own script. So coming to this script here, we simply just add this here, then we save. Now, when we let's cd back into this step 6. So we say cd step 6. Then here we don't need to use this code anymore to run the server. We can simply just say npm run server, because here we have a server script here. So when we run this and then we come back here, let's refresh this. Okay, so we can see that this works fine because we've been able to run the server using another means, right? Using another way to actually run it. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is let's load or launch the names.jsx file as well. Okay, so what we need to do now is we also want to implement this code in such a way that on React, when we load the React app, this data also will be rendered in the browser. Currently, let's see what's happening in the React app. Okay, so there's nothing happening in the React app right now. So let's create another terminal where we can run the React app. So here we can see that in the main.jsx, we've removed the data. So we are not expected to actually have the data rendered on the browser using the React app. Let's close this package JSON file. So when we do npm run dev, this should not return the data for us. It should return every other thing, but not the data. So let's run this and see. Let's refresh this page. Okay, so here nothing works actually. Nothing works. So what can we do to make this work? Let's go to app.jsx and let's see how we can work this out. All right, so since we installed Axios and we are going to be using useEffect, so we simply just come here and include useEffect here, and also come to the next line and then import axios from axios. So let's save this. Now we are having some warnings here. This is just trying to tell us that we've declared this but we've not used them. All right, now let's use them. So as we can see here, we initially called the data from the person's array using the props, and then here we actually place the person's array here initially, right? But now we are calling the data directly using the axios. That means we won't be needing props. We also won't be needing props here as well. That means we won't be using props here. So what we can just do here is we are going to be setting an empty array here and also setting another empty array here, right? Because this person state and the filtered person state, they both work in a similar way, right? Only that this one has to be filtered before being used. All right, so let's save this. So having saved this, we can see that we have this returned here, right? All right, so the next thing we need to do is we need to define the use effect hook. So we could just come here and then write it. We say use effect. So inside of it is another function, something like this. Then let's console log first to see what comes up in the browser or on the console. Let's say effect, right? So here I am just trying to follow the steps used in the material, right? Okay, so the next thing to do is we are going to be calling the axios, and then we say get Here we are using get because we want to try to fetch the data from the server. Now, here, if you recall here, we can actually get the data by just putting in this endpoint here, and then we get this data here. That means that we can simply just come here, copy this endpoint, and then place it into this part here. So it becomes like this. That means that Axios is getting the data from this endpoint, right? Now, after that, we use the then, and inside then we are going to be passing in a response, which also behaves similarly like this. And then let's console log something. Let's write promise fulfilled. So this is going to be displayed if the promise, that's if the use effect works properly, or rather if Axios is able to fetch the data from this endpoint correctly. So this is what we get as the console message, right? So let's save this. So after doing this, the next thing we want to do is we want to use this set person, right, which is a function to update whatever is going to be the data returned or fetched using the Axios, right? In our own case is the person state. So we can see that here the person state is initially set to an empty array, right? Then what we can do is we simply come here and say set persons. Then inside set persons, we are going to be placing in this response, right? We place in the response and then calling the data in the response. Having done this, let's see what we can do. Let's go back to the React app and let's refresh to see if anything happens. So nothing happens because we've only been able to implement the code for this person state. We also need to do the same thing for the filtered person state. So let's copy this, go into the next line, we paste, and then we put response dot data. So let's save this and see if anything gets returned. Let's refresh this. Okay, so currently nothing is showing up, right? Okay, so here let's come here and then let's add an empty array. Now, what this array means is this is missing a dependency. Okay, so here what this array means is when an array is passed in this part of use effect, right? It only shows that the use effect is going to be run once, right? But if any other thing is passed into it, the use effect behaves differently. Okay, so let's save this to be sure of what's happening. I think something is wrong with our code, right? Um, let's be sure of what's happening. Axios.get.then we have response. Inside response, we have a console log, set persons, set filtered person. Okay, not filtered person rather, but set filtered person. So let's save this. Okay, so here now we can see that we have this data returned correctly, right? So let's expand this and see what's happening in the background. So you go into the developers tool. Let's close this and then let's refresh. Okay, so here we have effect to promise fulfilled. Okay, all right, so let's go back to our code. Let's just do something like this to expand this a little. um, all right, okay, so let's also make it in a way that we can actually see the number of persons, right, that are being rendered to this, or that are being, that is being rendered on the browser using this application. So what we can do is we just come to this next line and say console log then let's say persons.length, persons.length, right? So let's save this. So here we can see that we are having 4%. That's why we are having 4 here. So we can just make it look nice. We can say comma persons, or person in brackets. No, not this way. It has to be in a string. Persons, and then we can just say render for persons. So here now we have render for persons. All right, so also we can also use a catch block, right? Just in case an error comes up. So how can we do that? We can just come here and say dot catch. Inside the catch, we place in a parameter error, and then do something like this. Then we say console log error. Then we place it in a string, not console, sorry, not console log error, console error, right? Rather. So inside it, we say error fetching data, right? Then we can just put a comma and then return the data, the error itself. So let's save this. So this is going to catch any error that comes up in trying to fetch the data from the persons, right? From the db.json, right? Which is the data that is going to be gotten from the server. All right, so what else do we need to add to this project? Um, let's expand this browser and let's close this. Let's see if the app works very well. Okay, let's go back to the F12. All right, let's close this and then let's see if we can add a name to the data we have here. So let's call this Apple Blue, and the name is, and the number is 567-567-34. Let's click on add. All right, so this name and number is added successfully. Let's see if we can filter Apple from this name list, right? So let's say AP, let's type in AP since Apple is the only name here that has AP together. So we say AP. All right, so here we can see that Apple Blue is what is rendered. Also, if we type in, let's say we want to grab Abramov, let's type AM. We can see that this name Dan Abramov is the only name here that has A and M together. So the search or the filter works great. All right, so this shows that our application works great up to this point, and it also shows that we've been able to successfully implement the code for this exercise 2.11, right, using the Axios library. Let's see if there's any other thing we can do. Okay, I think there's something else we can do. We can see that here we can't really reuse this hook per se. So what we can do is we can just set this part to a variable name and then place in the variable name here. So let's cut this away and let's come to the line above and say const, let's call it hook equals everything we just pasted, which is this, right? So inside this part now, we are simply going to place hook. And I hope our code does not break by doing this. Okay, so let's go back to the React and see if our code works well again. All right, so we've been able to successfully render the data on the browser. That shows that our code works very, very well, right? Okay, guys, thanks for having me in this video also, and see you in the next. Bye.